All right. All right. So for today's class, we're going to open the data set that ships with Revit. Is the the three-story school that comes out of the box. To open it, go ahead and hit the home button. The home button switches on and off the welcome screen, but it exposes the ribbon. And then under the File tab, hover over the Open command and scroll to the very bottom where it says Sample Files. Again, to get started, expose the Open Revit, expose the tabs by going into the Home tab, then go to the File tab, put your cursor on top of the Open. Don't click Open. If you click Open, it's going to open the dialog box. Just hover over and then scroll down until the sample files it's exposed, and you will see that there's all these projects that shipped out of the box, and select the RAC Advanced Sample Project. RAC. Make sure not to pick the RME, that's mechanical, or the RST, that's the structural. Is the RAC Advanced Sample Project, and then hit open. And because I don't want you to edit the out-of-the-box location, let's just save it on your desktop or your preferred folder on your system. So you just go to File and then hit Save As.
I have a question. Does anybody have, what if it didn't go to the sample? Mine didn't show up as a sample. It went to some other place. So where would the samples be if it's that path is not there?
Good. Thanks for interrupting me. I think it started in Revit 2023. No, that's not true. Depending on how the packages, your deployment package is structured, sometimes it may include or may exclude the out-of-the-box files. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this in the Google Drive and share the link for those who couldn't get it. Let me save it under element, material, and custom keynotes, rack advanced sample projects. Give it a minute until it finish uploading. And then I'll share the link in a few seconds. So Drive. There you go. So I'm going to share the link. And in the chat panel, here is the link. Just click on that link and download the file if you weren't able to access it. All right, I see more people signing in. Welcome, Truk, Sam, Key, Lydia, Lindsay, Young, Isabella. Um, all right, everybody with me? Everybody has this file?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else need more time? Speak up or I'll continue. All right, I didn't hear anybody. All right, before I get started, let's talk about, we're gonna talk about how to annotate using keynotes. And keynote is basically a tag that reports information contained by the object definition. In Revit, we have tags that are view specific. That means that they live on top of the view, like this wall tag and this window tag. And tags are, there is a tag for every category in Revit. So for every category that you see in visibility graphics, you create under the model categories, you have the ability to create a tag that is specific to each of the element categories. And so, for example, this is a wall tag, and the category of this tag is wall tag. And these wall tag report information contained by the wall. And so the type property, the tag itself does not contain any information. The information is contained by the wall. So the A1, it's type parameter of the walls. Here it's type mark. And if you change this tag, then I'm going to change it to R2, for example. You change it to all the walls of the same type, right? So you probably know this already. And so the value of having a product like Revit or BIM is that we become also the we become the tender person of the information contained by all these assembles. And as designers, we're not only in charge of creating this beautiful 3D model, but we also need to make sure that the information contained in it is correct and it's aligned to the way your company creates documentation. And so Keynote is the same thing. Keynote report information contained by the elements. And there are various type of keynotes and various different ways of report information contained by these objects. I'm not sure what method you use, but I'm gonna go, because after this class, I hope you understand how keynotes work, and maybe in your organization you already have a standard way on how keynotes are established in projects. Sometimes there are company or firm-wide standards. For example, a company may choose to only use keynotes, element keynotes. Another one could choose only to use user keynotes, and another one maybe material keynotes, and another different strategies for different specific purposes. Okay, so before I get into the keynote, I want to open in this project. There is a detail I think it's called detail at parapet. Yeah, detail at parapet. On the private browser, just open it. This is a large detail with a lot of two-dimensional component on top of it. There are elements in this view that come from the 3D view, from the 3D geometry in the model. And there are two-dimensional elements that are placed on top of the view. For example, this profile, this coping section, it's an element that is not in 3D. It's pasted on top of the view to enhance the design intent of the detail. And so in certain organizations, they establish specific procedures on how to annotate details. This is one of them. If you are a seasoned professional, you probably seen this way of annotating. Have you seen this way of creating details? This is based on CSI nomenclature. I personally haven't worked very often with projects that use this method, but I did it in the Midwest and in the East Coast. Probably it's more popular in those regions. But anyway, this is a keynote. And this keynote is reporting information contained by these elements. And so these keynotes can be as a family. If you look at the properties of the keynote, it has a property that is called key source. And this actually, it's a visual way to report what type of keynote it is. Because you can have a keynote that is material, a keynote that is user, and a keynote that is element. I'm going to explain the differences between these three key sources. All right, let's start by creating, us talking about element keynotes. So I am in the detail at parapet. And I'm going to duplicate it, duplicate view. And just so that you understand, you probably know what's the difference between duplicate and duplicate with detailing. If I just do a duplicate, notice that the only things that are coming from the model, it's really just the levels. Now, everything about the detail, the previous detail, is two-dimensional detail. So it's not really a good example of using this hybrid mix of 3D elements and two-dimensional elements. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm gonna right-click and duplicate view with detailing, and that means it duplicates the view and all the two-dimensional elements that are pasted on top of it. And so everything about this detail is in 2D. It's in 2D, except the levels. Okay. So an element keynote report type of parameters nested in the definition of the object. And so what that means is that, for example, if I select this two-dimensional object, which is a detail item of a rigid insulation section, I think I talk about the difference between instance and type property. Instance properties are properties unique to an object, is everything you see in the property window. And then type properties are all the properties common to all the elements of the type. So notice how inside the element definition of this detail item, there is a keynote value associated with the type, with the parameter keynote. And so the keynote is simply reporting the information contained by that. Let's open another example. If I select, this is a representation of slab core side. If you edit the type properties, edit type, the keynote associated with that is 0341 C10. And the keynote is only reporting that information. And so this keynote is actually connected to a database that lives in the project. The database is a TXT file that you can actually access by clicking on this value. So if you click, again, select this element, edit the type properties, edit type, and then navigate to where it says keynote and click on that value. You're going to see that there is three little dots that are displayed on the right side of this cell. And this is going to open the keynote text file. And so let me know if you get this.
Yeah. So if it's in this list, that just means it's in some library. It doesn't necessarily mean it's in the project, right?
That's correct. That means
Okay.
if this is in the database, it doesn't mean that all these values are not loaded in the project. It's just that this is just a section of those. This is the path of the keynote. Right now it's C, program data, Autodesk, Revit 2023, libraries, English Imperial, Revit keynote. Again, I'm asking, is anyone missing this file? Because if you're missing it, I can email it to you. This keynote should be pre-populated, and this text definition ships with Revit, so it should be under the installation files. All right, so this is a database of keynotes that are organized by CSI number, and this is, I believe, the old master format. This is master format 2004, if I'm not wrong. I got a message that somebody needs this. I'm going to email to everyone these keynotes. So bear with me. I'm going to cancel here, cancel here. For those who do not have the database, let me tell you, after you receive this file, you need to set up your keynote settings. Under the keynote, the last item in this drop-down list that says keynote settings, this is the default location. I'm going to copy this and paste it in the chat panel, and let me know if you have, if you can just copy paste it. This should load if this TXT file exists in your machine. It should be in this location. And if it's not, I'm gonna email it to you regardless. So I'm gonna do that now.
So this, just the fact that you have this database doesn't tell the contractor what all these numbers mean. They must get a spec with all this in it. And I guess Revit publishes that somewhere, or?
No, this is just the a spec number and a spec description, but it doesn't tell you anything about the full spec text. Yeah, that's a separate workflow, and right now there are programs that combine that, but not out of the box. All right, this is the folder where the text file is stored. This is the path that I can also share it with you if you wanna. I'm gonna put this in the chat panel. This file has these are 6 different databases. You have the Revit Keynote Imperial, which is pre-2004. And then, you know, the CSI changed the way the industry classified the built environment, and they released a new way of classifications. That is 2010. And then it has a version that is metric, and it also, that's the one that we're using here. So this is the file I'm going to email to everyone. I'm going to copy. Now let me create a email here. New email. And I'm going to send this to your way. All right, it should be on your inbox. So these TXT files is not the full CSI nomenclature. I would say it's probably like 60% of everything you would find. Users have the ability to edit this text to as suited for their project, or you can start one from scratch. So I'm going to show you both, how you can edit something and how you can create one from scratch. Yang, let me know or text me if you were able to download this.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so if you receive that TXT file, do the following. Go into your Annotate tab, Keynote settings, and browse to the location where you download that TXT file. A project, it's linked. Every machine, it's linked to a text file. So in the context of cloud of shared collaboration, if you decide to use a Keynote database, there's going to be just a single database that it's placed in your server. And then all the users or all the users that are going to be contributing to edit this text file need to connect to the same location. And so what that means is that only one person can edit the TXT file at a time. Does that make sense? That's one of the drawbacks of the out of the box, because TXT files, I believe, can only be edited by one person at a time. And if you have this TXT open and somebody tried to access it to edit it, you won't be able to manually edit. It's going to say this is locked, basically. There are products out there, the add-ons for Revit. I think Revolution Design has a Keynote Manager, which is a great add-in that allow multi-user editing of a Keynote. I'll show you the Keynote Manager in a second. But again, if you did not have that text definition, going to the Annotate Keynote settings and browse to the location of the Revit Keynote metric, and this should come on your, should be connected. All right, so let's see how an element Keynote is created. So go to the Annotate tab, Keynote, and create element Keynote. I'm gonna Keynote the notice that Keynote tag. The Keynote tag comes with a type called boxed, and I'm gonna select the this element, notice how when an element doesn't have information, you see how the repeating detail doesn't have it doesn't report anything. But when I hover over the rigid insulation, you can actually preview the values right here. It says that's a rigid insulation and that is the CSI number. All right, so you place it. The second click is the arm of the keynote, the arm and the elbow, and then you escape. Now the reason this came, I didn't have to pick the choice from the database is because it's already embedded in the definition of this element. So these rigid insulation section, when I look at the type properties, it already contain keynote value that the tag simply grab it and report it. Now, if you want to change that, then you can, you're going to modify the type property of this element. And these elements could be a wall, a door, it could be any three-dimensional geometry. Here, it just happens to be a detail item. And if I change the value of the keynote, you click these three little dots next to it. Right now, it's a 75 rigid insulation. I'm going to change it to 50 millimeter rigid insulation. And because it's a type property, notice that there's already a tag above. So I hit OK, and then I hit OK. Notice how every tag in the project that is calling out for this particular type is going to get an updated value. And so one of the greatest value of element keynoting is that you can make changes to the element description or the element text or the element number or tag number, keynote number. The same call out is going to get updated all across all the views, across all the details that are using that same element. If you do this on a manual way, for example, when you are creating annotations manually, this process is just text, and this text needs to be edited manually in every detail in the project. That's a lot of wasted resources. And so if the keynote and the text description of the keynote is going to be repeated across multiple details, is use element keynotes. That's that would be one of my recommendations. But that requires the user to stay on top of the information contained by the 3D geometry. And that's an extra level of management that we need to be aware. We not only you have to load a family into the project, now you also need to verify that the type information contained by that element has the right information. But the advantage is that this information is consistently represented and described across all the views. Now this is reporting CSI numbers, but I can choose to display instead of the keynote number, I can choose to display the keynote text. So now, I mean, I can select all the keynotes in the project in this view. Sorry, I do a crossing selection. That means select everything on the screen, filter just the keynote tags. There are 7 keynote tags. And make them a keynote text description. And so instead of reporting number, now you are reporting the information contained by it.
What was the command to get to make them of that?
Do you have the selection? Do the crossing selection?
Yes, I got the selection.
do the filter,
Yeah, I did that.
and then the type selector, which is in this drop-down menu.
Oh, okay.
There are different type of keynote families. The third one is keynote text.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And now instead of reporting the CSI number, is actually reporting the description of that. And using the same logic, if I select the element, the insulation, and let's say I say, oh, there's a mistake here. I need to 50 millimeter rigid insulation brand X. I need to add that brand X at the end of all the descriptions in the project. But because I'm using element keynote, I only do it once inside the element database, and then the tag value gets spread all across the project. Let me show you how that's done. You select the rigid insulation here, edit the type properties, and then in the keynote only presents you with the information by the database. So I don't have the ability to edit information on the database here, but I can swap to another keynote. Let's say this is now a bat insulation. So I'm changing the value. I change OK, change OK. And now I have a different keynote value embedded in the type definition of the element, and then the text is reported accordingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it didn't change the look of the element in the detail.
The look, no, because this is these are two separate things. The geometry,
Right, okay.
the information is one thing.
Mhm.
That due diligence is our responsibility. We need to make sure that it matches, right?
Okay.
But yeah, if I want to do, if I'm thinking as an architect, this is I should replace this text installation with this. Sorry, the bat hardboard with the bat installation. Okay, so pros, just a summary of the pros of this method. That it's very easy to have a consistent set of annotations across multiple views, across multiple sheets, across all the project. And there's a consistent language in the description of the construction elements. You have a less risk on errors or omissions, and then you can execute the changes more quickly. That's the pro. And then what's not so good about it is that now the designer needs to tender the information contained by each of the objects and make sure that each of the 3D geometry that is called out has the appropriate keynote value. And that's an extra level of management. But I think the pros are far exceed, the need of doing keynotes. The alternate is doing this using regular text. So you will annotate tab text. But this is the dumb way of doing it. This is the old school of doing it. You just do an annotation, and then you write what that is. Parapet cap. This is just text. It is not reporting any information. It's not automatic. And so, but to my surprise, a lot of practices actually use this method as opposed as other type of keynote. Any question about element keynote before I move to the next one? All right.
I have a question, Caesar.
Yes.
So in this process, do we need every single one of the elements to be like a family? Like for example, you were trying to hover over one of the repetitive details and doesn't show anything. Yeah, that one. What are you gonna do if you wanna be consistent by using just Keynote in a project? Then everything in the detail view, that's to just stay on the detail section. Then we're talking about every single thing that you've drawn in a detail view. It would have to have an identity. In which case, like sometimes not everything we've drawn is like that. Sometimes it's just like a field region. Sometimes it's just lines. So how are you gonna kind of put those information into the Keynote uh, system as well?
Yeah. So the beauty of this is that you don't have to be either or. You can combine them. Let's say, for example, I create a model line that represents sorry, not a model line, a detail line that represents some steel. This is not three-dimensional steel. It's not a family. It's just a line. And I want to keynote that. The element keynote is not going to work because it's not a family.
Yeah.
But I can actually use the user keynote. Is that right? And then this user keynote is not connected to anything. And I look for the steel, metals, and whatever, metal fabrication. So
Is there one that's like to be determined, so you can just leave like a placeholder to get back to it later?
there is, when it comes to keynotes, if it's a family, the family could be empty and it's going to be empty. For example, the bad insulation, maybe I'm not sure yet. It's just clear and it's not reporting anything now.
Oh, so you get a question mark, so you can come back and,
Yeah, like,
oh, that's good.
like this is maybe the drafter doesn't know the final.
Right. So
Uh,
someone later can fill in the blanks and add it to the text file.
Yeah. And then the user keynote is not connected to any geometry per se, but it's connected to the same database as the element ones. So you can always change the value without the need of getting connected geometrically. Does that make sense?
Yes, and after you do this, eventually when you're trying to put the schedule on top of the sheet, it's gonna show up together with the real keynotes. So the user keynote is basically like a dummy text that points to a thing, right?
It's a tag that reports values from the database.
Yes. And then when you're putting the schedule on top of the sheet, is the user keynote gonna show together with the element keynote?
No, this way of placing keynotes cannot be scheduled. Well, let me say, if you go to the view tab, the only thing that you can schedule are generic annotations, which is this thing called note block.
I think he meant creating a legend.
Oh yes, a legend.
Yeah.
A legend.
Oh, you were going in the right direction, Caesar.
Oh,
A
this,
keynote legend, yes.
okay, a keynote legend. Yeah.
So instead of a descriptive text, it's called ABC, and A is defined as rigid insulation, for instance.
Yes. Yeah, this is the keynote legend, not a keynote schedule. And the keynote schedule can be added on a sheet. But you can yeah, these can be added, let's say, at the bottom of the sheet or on a side of the on a side of the sheet.
And it looks like it just picks up what's in this detail, doesn't pick up the whole bloody text thing, which is good.
Yes, it doesn't connect to the entire database.
Right.
But in the properties of the legend, you can do it by sheet. If you wanna, like, if you wanna narrow it to only show the ones by sheet, you can enable that here. And then instead of the entire keynote in use in the project, it's just gonna display the ones that are in the sheet.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
So this narrow the items only to those that are in place.
So if you turn that off, we'd get a huge legend.
You get the legend of all the keynotes
Uh-huh.
that are in use.
used by the project. But if you go into the properties of the legend, you can narrow it down on the filter tab if needed to be. Thanks for asking that question. Yeah.
So my question is that user keynote you just created, that's attached to that line. Is that keynote gonna show in the keynote legend
Yes.
together with other element keynotes?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, let's open it. This is the ornamental metal and the keynote legend here. It's a combination of, you see the ornamental metal is there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
This legend is a combination of element, user, and material keynotes. It's all dumped into the same thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, that was my question. All right. Thanks.
You might want to discuss the downside of using user keynotes in that you can have errors in the project and you wouldn't know it.
You would have what?
Errors in the project and you wouldn't know it because they're not connected to a family or an element. It's just a little bit scary to use those too many times.
Yeah, you certainly can place user keynotes anywhere in the project whenever there's a need to add nodes that are not necessary associated with geometrical elements. But I would argue that it reduces error because it maintains correlation between what is described, what is annotated in the detail and what is presented in the legend. If these were disconnected databases, you have the extra due diligence of aligning the values of the keys with the values of the legend, and this due diligence should be automatic. This is an automatic way of doing it. But yeah, to your point, when there's automation involved, there's a need to put in place quality control processes to make sure that automation is actually reporting information that is good and that it's accurate. Yeah.
In a scenario like this, the line, makes sense if you're drawing a waterproof membrane up and over the parapet. You can't possibly do that. I guess you can with a detail item, a detail family.
Yes.
Yes. If I think there's an example here. Although this is the coping. Let me show you another, and there's an example here where that is done. Open detail at grade, I think.
Could I add a little something to what this discussion is right here?
Yeah.
Seems like it takes a lot longer to create the detail family and use it instead of just drawing the line and putting the right line type and line weight to it, and then just adding a user node on it. It seems like it's longer to do the family, but it's really not. You do it once, and then you can use it all over the project, and it's then tied into the Keynote system.
I agree with that. I think there's a little extra more effort at the front end, building the family definition, and you need to know how to do it well. But once that family is created, then all the users can simultaneously use across, and it will contain the consistent information. If you open the detail at grade, here is an example. You see, this is this make uses of detail groups. I'm not a big fan of detail groups. But for example, this is an air infiltration barrier that this is a family, a two-dimensional detail family. You could use 2 lines, right? And be done with it. But to have to build this as a family might take I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But once you create it, then it can be associated. It could be distributed across all the project. It can be used consistently as a detail family. Let's see another example. These are all groups.
Can you tab into the group and have it select elements inside the detail group, like the repeating group of the CMUs? Can you tab in and still tag that?
This is the repeating detail. And repeating detail has do not have a mark value.
You can't tab down into it.
Let's see if I annotate.
I don't think.
I can't remember.
No, I don't think repeating detail can be tagged. That's why we make a family of an individual block
No, try
and
tab there. You can't.
insert it to tag it on top of it.
I mean, you can associate mark values, but that's not a keynote. That will be a tag.
That's funny. I thought it could be done. I was wrong.
Now, you remember we have used a single CMU module and insert on top of the repeating detail to tag it.
Yeah, that's a workaround.
Yeah.
On the you place on top of the repeating detail the detail item, the CMU section.
Kind of surprises me they haven't fixed this.
Yeah.
And then that element can now be tagged. There you go. These, these, yeah, that's a limitation, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't done something about that, but earlier on, you were saying how the entire office can edit this text file of the keynote values. You know, you place it in a position on the server and you let the office sort of over time build on it. What's your attitude about having a keynote file for each project?
It certainly depends on the scope of work and the type of market it is. In big offices or medium-sized offices, they usually have a boilerplate that it's sort of aligned with project typology. That make it easier to control. Like when I was in another office, they have one for airports, one for interiors, and one for landscape architecture, for example. And there were three different databases according to the market and the typology.
That's all really good, and I think that should be done. But what I'm worried about a lot of times is that the user on a project by project basis will be making unique edits to the text file, possibly inducing errors. But even if they don't, sometimes they have specific kind of nomenclature for certain items, and they'll modify it. And the danger is that it becomes office-wide data, but it hasn't been vetted or in any way. So it would be preferable to have each project, even if it's copied from a product type, school or hotel or whatever. You have those individual ones, but then you copy it down into the project directory and you name it around the project number, and that way when it's edited, it sort of stays contained with that project.
I agree with you on that one, but I also think that protocols need to be in place in the BIM execution plan that we're going to talk next class about who is entitled to make changes to this database. So sometimes I've been in projects where there's only 2 or 3 people who really do these edits, and it's the technical principal and a couple of technical project architects. And then the rest is not entitled to do that. So there are some restrictions about who can do that. And then a much more efficient way is to solve this out-of-the-box limitation. There is an add-in that I think, I don't know if you're familiar, the Keynote Manager by Revolution Design, which is it's a tool that allows it's a multi-user it's a tool that allows multiple users to have certain privileges in the database. So there's someone who has ownership of the entire database, and then you can add members to selectively edit some portions of the database according to the scope of work they are entitled to do. It's much user friendly to edit than the out-of-the-box one. I work in an office that had this in place, and it really make a big difference from the out-of-the-box method. It's stuck as a window in Revit, and you see here not only you are the user, it's exposed to the keynote number and value, but certain users have the ability to edit it right on the spot. Like this one is doing it on the spot. And it can be done at a project level as well as at a firm-wide level. Of course, this is something that Autodesk should do out of the box, like.
Yeah.
And
It's on the roadmap.
I work for Autodesk, so, but this is, I'm entitled to my opinion, right? But maybe in the future, I don't know. It is the out of the box. Let me show you what is the out of the box so that you know the limitations. Okay, so we were talking about editing the database, and I'm just going to manually open it, copy. All right, this is the TXT file that I emailed to you. I'm just going to open it. And when you open it, this is a TXT file. And it has a bunch of values separated by tabs. And so these text nodes can be edited by a person, and new values can be added. But this is the way this works. Information in Keynote, it's staggered. It's sort of like a tree of information. Let me show you here. For example, if I select, I'm going to go back to my previous detail. If I select this element and open the Keynote associated with it, all right, there's the parent, let's call it tier 1 information. Those are the divisions. Then the tier 2 information, that is like the CSI main section. And then there are a tier 3 type of information. In some examples, there are 4 tiers of information, like division. In this example, is concrete. Then we have concrete accessories, and then point numbers for the 4th tier. So this hierarchy is reflected in the TXT nodes as well. So the first rows of these text nodes are they call it the first tier of this tree branch. Then you start highlighting manually the second tier of information. And so the second tier of information needs the secondary number, or the second tier classification number. And then right at the end of the description, we have to write down the parent tree. So that's what's annoying. So now you see that the price and payment procedures, it's part of division 1, and this is their number. And so the parent information is always added after the classification number, after the classification description. And so everything is built that way. This here is the third example. So this is temporary dustproof. Is this piece of information here? The temporary facilities controls. A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. That's the description. And then at the very end, you write what is the parent branch of this information. It's 0, 1, 500. And then 0, 1, 500 is this guy, which is the child. Let's call it the child branch of branch 0100. So editing this manually does require a lot of, in particular, this is going to be a big database with several branches of information, it becomes cumbersome. If it's a small project, maybe you don't, and you want to add your own key values, and maybe not connected to the CSI definition, you might as well just leave it as a single branch text file and be done with it. And you have 100 keynotes, and that's the only thing you're interested in scheduling. But most projects have more than 100 keynotes, and then you need to understand how this is put together from scratch. And so, so you understand what I'm saying? This keynote is connected to the CSI number, but you have, for example, if you want to like use a system that is custom, for example, you want a system that is driven by letters, and let's say keynotes with number D, D1, D2, D3, those are demolition keynotes. C1, C2, C3, those are construction keynotes. L1, L2, L3, maybe those are ceiling details. And you can build your own nomenclature of keynotes in this database, and add branches, tier branches as needed. But you keep in mind that due diligence is needed as far as adding the parent branch at the end of each description. So with the adding, with the Keynote Manager adding this cumbersome way of editing, it's alleviated. It's much easier. You don't have to worry about that description and about that suffix at the end. Does that make sense? Any reaction? Any comment on your end?
I might add that spec writers are interested in this keynoting system, and some of them who are capable of it. We have a few at HWI that we work with that are very interested in it. They can harvest this information from the model, and they can use it to develop outline specifications and then further develop the spec. And at some point, there's a real tight collaboration between the spec writer and the project team. That's where it's going. Although I expected it to happen a long time ago, it's still not quite getting there yet, but it's close.
Correct. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a sequence for this? Because it looks like the parents are all in the top, and then as you go into the subcategories, they're all in the bottom. What if you want to add a subcategory? Does it have to be in a certain location in the Keynote notepad?
Yeah, the sequence is critical so that it display the way you want in the Keynote, in this Keynote dialog box. So if you notice, right after the first tier where you declare the main branches, then you have all your 01s, all your 01s declare, and then the last portion of elements is the third tier. So basically, you build your sections by branches. So the first tier branches go first. The second tier branches go second, and the third one follow. But it's sort of by section.
I think the first branch and the second branch has to be fairly accurate to tie into CSI. The third branch, where A1 to A6, is kind of a user interpretation.
Well, it can be, but sometimes.
Well, A1, A to A6 doesn't exist in CSI.
Yeah, it does. As products in the product list, it can.
They do.
Yeah.
But I think the question is if the sequence matters. And one, let's do a test. You know, I'm just gonna insert this, and I'm gonna insert this here, which is gonna be A7. And I'm going in this temporary weatherproof enclosure too. So I'll save this.
Notice he preserved the tabs on that line.
Yeah, the tabs must be preserved. If there's no tab, then it wouldn't work. I'm gonna close this and see if that new out of order text appear in the right thing. So I'm gonna cancel here. Go to Keynote, reload to refresh, and then go back to the database and yeah, there it is. So the order doesn't matter, to answer your question. The order in the database, it doesn't matter. I think just the very first tier matters. Like the main division must be declared at the very.
That's good. Just trying to find it all the way in the bottom is so cumbersome.
Yes. Just the main branch goes at the top.
Better to keep it organized as the file was originally found.
No, but if you open the TXT file again, it will reorganize itself, right?
Yes, I think.
Let's see.
You should push for a more graphic user interface rather than the TXT.
Way, I have a method using Excel that's very slick. It's a workaround from using the Keynote Manager, but it works really, really well and keeps everything organized. You see the tabs. It's all done by cells. So if anyone's interested, I'm glad to show it.
Yeah. There's also some Dynamo-based scripts that allow like that transition from Excel into a Note. I've seen many different solutions, but I agree this should be something that the program should make it easier for the users to edit. I don't know your solution, but if that's a company standard, certainly your users should know how to do that. So I just want to check if the notepad really reorders it. Let's go back and check this. That's the metric that I saved today. I know you see the A7.
Yeah, it's not reordered, yeah.
Still out of order.
Oh, no.
But it just makes it really hard to kind of keep track of it. This can get to be a real mess. And then when you go to load it and it says the load fails, which happens all the time because the syntax is messed up, it's really hard to find these edits and entries unless they're organized.
Yeah, I think, but that needs the due diligence of the.
Right. I mean, the reason you keep it in order is to make it easy for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, that little key number at the back is what orders the machine to find it. So.
Yeah. The fact that it's possible to do doesn't justify that it has to be done. You know, it's for your organization purposes. Yes, it's best to organize them by branch order. Another solution that I've seen some firms do to prevent unauthorized use is to lock the file in a folder in the project, and so only certain this you need to work with IT to do that and say, hey, this folder in the project, it's locked from editing, and it's only certain people have the right to edit, and that might prevent making unauthorized changes. And then I think the Excel route, it's a good one. Maybe at the start of the next class, you can show us how it works, because I'm also curious.
I'll do it now if you want.
You want to do it now? Yeah, because
I could walk you through it. All you do is you open Excel, you load this file in as a tab delimited file. And in all the structure of the tab delimited becomes cells inside of Excel. And then when you write it out as a TXT from the Excel. And it's really quite elegant. So if you open this file into Excel, you'll see what I mean.
yeah,
Import it as tab delimited.
yeah. Let me fire Excel here.
So while you're doing that, so there isn't anything in the works where you can call detail keynotes from a 3D model that becomes an underlay of a detail. For instance, if you created a wall with multiple layers of panels, rigid insulation, sheathing, you can't call it out right now.
Yes, yes, you can. You can call the individual layers as materials layers. That's the last keynote I need to show. Material keynotes. There's a single element, the wall, right? And then the wall as an element keynote just report one value. But if you use material keynotes, then you can call all the different layers inside a wall.
As long as the materials are coordinated. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're gonna, did you select that file?
I wanna the TXT files, where are they? Okay, it's TXT files. This is the metric.
And you're gonna bring it in as a tab delimit. It should come in as tab delimit. It'll ask you, I think, there, and I just delimited. Yep.
Tab.
Yep.
Finish.
Presto changeo.
Yeah, this is nicer.
And
Yeah.
now you can kind of see organized, where the tabs are because they're cells now. And now if you save this out, you go file, save as, I think, file, save as, and you pick tab delimited text and you write it out.
Yeah.
Just a better way to organize and see the syntax.
Yeah, agree. This is much better than doing it in the notepad.
Plus you can do searches in here and everything you can do in the notepad. You can do search and replaces. You can do all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
I think you can even globally change to caps too here. You probably do that in the notepad, although I'm not sure of that. You could also use Word to do the same thing, but this is much better.
I agree. You can use all the functionality of Excel to aid you in the editing process.
Just you got to remember to write it out as tab delimited and then load it, and hopefully you get successful load.
Yeah.
You haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, fantastic tip. Yeah, thanks for sharing it with the group. You don't have to use CSI nomenclature. You can create your own. The limitation is that you cannot repeat a keynote value twice, right? Revit is going to get angry. So if you cannot have two divisions with the same number. or two branches with the same number. You can save it, but when you load it, it's going to give you an error message. All right, so but that's what the tool is as it is right now. The last one I want to show you is the material ones, and this is in line with that question. I'm going to open this section through this main stair and display this wall section, which actually have all these different layer configurations. And so if I use an element keynote, I'm calling out the wall assemble keynote property. If the value is empty, like right now, let me back up here. This exterior wall, when I open the type properties, has an empty keynote value. You see, it's empty. When I enable keynotes by element and that value is empty, Revit's going to know that it's empty and it's going to automatically prompt you to fill that information. And let's say I'm just going to randomly pick this thing. And now when I go back and check the type properties, the keynote operation embedded a keynote to the wall itself. So when you use element keynotes, Revit is going to prompt you to pick a value for it, and it's going to embed it into the type property. So be aware of that. All right, but if the question was, okay, I want to like tag all these individual layers, the only way to do that is using material keynotes. And so with the material keynotes, the keynote value and keynote description needs to be defined inside the material library. So when I look at this wall and I edit the type and access the layer information, these are all the layers. For the information to appear, the properties of these materials need to have under the identity data, there are Revit annotation information, and there's a keynote and a mark. And this is the masonry concrete block. This is the masonry concrete block.
4,200.
There you go. Masonry units. Concrete masonry units. Like, I'm just going to leave it there at that level. And then apply the mark. It's textual. You have the options of choosing what label to report the tag. This is an alternate custom value. It's not a keynote. The keynote is connected to the database. The mark is connected to a text description. So this is the masonry block. Hit OK, hit OK. And now when I go to keynote, material keynote, and I hit the wall, you see the 4,200 there is there. Now, if I do the same material keynote, but then I do it to these. Notice how the exterior. I think this is CMU. No, this is a finish.
Rigid.
Yeah, but the material database hasn't been changed. But if I place the material keynote, then I'm presented with the material database, and I think this is I don't know, finishes, plaster Gboard. Let's say it's Gboard. And then when I go back and check the type properties of the wall and look at the properties of that layer, which is the insulation, You see how it comes now pre-populated with the keynote? So you can either open the material browser and fill the keynote information, or place the keynote, and the keynote automatically is going to prompt you to add a value into this keynote. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And so it expedites the process of filling materials with or elements. The same happened with the elements. You don't have to be opening every single wall to make sure it has the right information. You just keynote it, and on the fly you populate the type parameter.
So now the materials are getting to be a little bit more precious.
Yes. You delete that material, you delete the database that go with it. So we need to tender the materials as well.
That can be extended to its appearance as well, once you start rendering it and doing other things not associated to the
Yeah.
noting, but the materials start to have real value.
Now, I have 3 keynotes here. This is an element keynote. It's reported here. This is the material keynote. And then the user one, which is connected to a geometry, but is not connected to anything in particular. This is not going to override any property of the wall. Let's say I'm going to say this is thermal moisture protection, roof siding panels, siding. This one, it's a user keynote. The 3 of them are exactly the same. They exactly have the same look and the same family. So if you look at the category, it's using the same family. It's just have a different key source. But the first 2 ones are reporting information embedded in the element, in the material, and this one is not reporting any information. This is just reporting information from the database. And
So
if
you can see the induced error right here.
say again,
You can see the induced error right here. Same material, looks like it's called out 2 different ways by specification number. In one place it's 04220, and then right there it's 07460.
you're right.
So it's very hard to try to keep that straight if you start using a lot of user keynotes that look like spec or keynote callouts. I use them primarily just for descriptive text that gets repeated all around the job. You want to say the same node in a lot of different places. And so it's sort of a descriptive verbal note, the user keynote, rather than accidentally doing something like that.
Right.
Well, I mean, to make the counter argument is the first one would be a wall type. Like the element is a wall type, right? And you would change it graphically.
Well, you'd use a wall type tag then. You wouldn't do that with the keynotes. If I follow you.
Sure.
Yeah,
And within the wall
that's how
type,
it should be.
So if this was a wall section and you're trying to call out the materials in the wall or how the wall was built, I would use the material there because you can call out all the different layers.
But if he wants to call a wall type out, I wouldn't do it by the node. I'd just use a wall type tag.
Yeah.
correct.
On top of the material tag to get the finer grain.
It
But
also gives you a different graphic notation so you won't be confused.
yeah, absolutely. And then you legend it and all the rest.
Yeah. Now, there's another type of tag that is called the material tag that is not a keynote tag.
Yeah.
Material tag is used mostly by interior designers who bake the material on, let's say, on a surface. And you just want to report the material that is on a surface or This type of tag behaves similarly to the keynote. This one is why it's not reporting anything. I'm not sure why it's not reporting anything. Because this material is already let me open the tag and see what parameter is reporting. Edit family. It's the material description. So if there's nothing in the material description, it wouldn't do it. So I need to go into the material library, add a description to these to the masonry. I think it's this value here. That's this one, right?
Yeah.
And so it's reporting a different type of parameters from. There you go. So in a material, you can have multiple parameters and use it for different purposes. Like I've seen interior designers, for example, they have their code finishes codes, and they are added as material descriptions without hindering the material element that is used in sections, you know.
Yeah, it's useful because they'll be separated from us.
Exactly.
And the beauty too is if it changes, you change it in one spot and it's changed globally throughout the project.
Yeah. All right, and the last one, the last thing I have here is a schedule of generic annotations, and this is completely dummy way of doing keynotes. Like this is reporting information in a database that is or may not be associated with an element. But if you just want to go simple and dummy, you can create a generic annotation. And a generic annotation is it's a family that with a parameter that's called text, and then you individually change it one by one, and that you can associate a leader to a generic annotation and then create a schedule of generic annotations. But that is almost the same as doing it with a text. It's almost similar doing it with a text, except that instead of using text, you're using a generic annotation. I think generic annotations are also called symbols. I don't know if I have one here. I don't think I have one handy, but the idea is that you can create a generic annotation and then add leaders. And let's say this is a generic annotation A1. And then you have another one that is A2, A3, and then you build a schedule of generic annotations by sheet, put it on a side. But this is really
So
this is all dummy.
good way to cause mistakes.
Yes, it's more risky. It's far more risky, yeah. All right, it's 7:10. I think this is the end of what I have for today. Hopefully this was enlightening for some of you. It was a good discussion. Use as you see the pros and the cons of the different methods and the out-of-the-box keynote editing. But as anything, follow the protocol established by the project. A BIM coordinator or a BIM manager should define from the very start of a project what is going to be the protocol for keynoting. Whether they use generic annotations or they use keynote by elements or keynote by materials or a mix of user material and keynote, that has to be explicitly explained in the BIM execution plan, and certainly it's part of the onboarding that happens when somebody joins the team. Where is this file? What are the families that you use for tags? Who is entitled to make changes into the database? What additional add-in you're going to use? And yeah, automation is good, but automation can act against you if protocols aren't followed. So any question, guys? All right, we're going to talk more about protocols in the next class when we talk about BIM management. I like how you participate today. Maybe next class, I'll share my experience of things that BIM execution plans might have. But you experience users there can always add your share of ideas and what are the best practices to manage a project. Thanks for participating today. And let's meet again on Monday. All right.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Can